Let's start with an introduction. I am David Stevens, Captain of the United Federated Systems Navy's heavy cruiser, USS Constitution. 500 years ago, I was Sergeant Major David Stevens, United States Army. I had been awarded my nation's highest honor for valor, the Medal of Honor. Because of an automobile accident, I lost my family, my wife and children. Nothing seemed worth living for anymore, so I volunteered as a subject for a top-secret project for cryogenic suspended animation. The United States of America was attacked by the Arab Consortium and I slept for almost 500 years, 1,000 feet below the surface of Groom Lake, Area 51, in Nevada. I won't go into the detail of my resurrection, education, or my commission into the UFS Space Navy. Suffice it to say, I am alone. More alone than any man has ever been, except, perhaps, Robinson Crusoe. But now, my story. The day I was commissioned captain of the USS Constitution, I met my crew and fell head over heels in love with Lieutenant Commander T'Vas. Commander T'Vas is a Hephaestus, my ship's surgeon, and a very beautiful woman. She had been a Commodore, but had rebuffed the advances of a high-ranking admiral and suffered his retribution, a courts-martial, reduction in rank, and assignment to the Constitution. Because of Navy regulations, I never confessed my love for Dr. T'Vas, and as a consequence, my isolation, loneliness, and depression only increased. My crew includes a number of Hephaestusian officers and crewmen. Hephaestusians are an empathic race, able to sense or feel the emotions of other beings. There are also telepathic members of the Hephaestusian race. Two such individuals are Commander T'Vas and Lieutenant Emily Trank. Lieutenant Trank is my ship's counselor. Both T'Vas and Trank stop me on my daily inspection of my ship, asking if they can help me in some way, sensing my depression and anxiety. One evening, it was about 2300 ship's time, and Lieutenant Trank, on her way to her quarters, was passing my cabin when a wave of pain hit her like an ion storm. She reeled a moment, straightened, and reached out with her empathic sense to discover the source of the pain. She determined that this wave of pain and loneliness came from my cabin. Shocked, she tapped her comm badge.
Trank to Dr. T'Vas.
A slightly annoyed voice replied.
T'Vas here, go ahead.
Lieutenant Trank returned.
Doctor, I'm outside the captain's cabin and was hit with a wave of extreme emotional pain. It almost knocked me over. I checked. It's coming from the captain's cabin. Please advise.
Fizz replied.
Stay there if you can, I'm on my way.
Lieutenant Trank stayed but moved away from the source of the pain. The doctor came around and staggered, having been hit by the extreme pain.
Emily, it's coming from the captain's cabin. But why are you here so far away from his cabin?
Emily replied.
I had to escape the horror.
T'Vas asked.
What can you feel in that wave?
Lieutenant Trank thought momentarily.
I feel a very profound loneliness and a feeling of isolation, not just loneliness but extreme isolation. I sense a powerful feeling of self-doubt. He feels, how can I explain it? He feels like a poor actor in a very bad play.
T'Vas stepped over to the door and touched the annunciator.
Captain, T'Vas here, open.
There was no reply. Again, she touched the annunciator.
Captain, open.
Again, no response. T'Vas touched her comm badge.
Computer, open the door to the captain's cabin. Priority medical override, T'Vas, Alpha 1.
The door to the cabin opened, and the two women saw their captain on the bed, in uniform, asleep, crying. T'Vas touched my shoulder but recoiled from the pain. Then Lieutenant Trank and T'Vas both shook me awake. I looked to my right, then to my left. What? What are you two doing here? I asked, swinging to a sitting posture. T'Vas sat at my right side and said,
Emily, sit there.
Indicating my left side. Both women put their arms around me. Lieutenant Trank said,
You know T'Vas and I are empaths. I was going to my cabin and was almost bowled over by the pain coming from you. I called Dr. T'Vas and she commanded the computer to open the door. Captain, we can feel your pain. Is there anything we can do?
I shook my head. Send me back to my time. Send me back to Stella. The two women were almost frightened at the intense emotions coming from me. T'Vas looked at Emily.
Emily, you're a trained counselor, show me what to do.
Emily took T'Vas' hand.
Like this.
She mentally showed T'Vas the place in my mind and began to soothe the pain I was experiencing. Emily and T'Vas worked to soothe my pain.
Doctor, this will provide temporary relief. It would take a powerful telepath to bury this permanently. But you or I can do this when his pain gets too much for him.
T'Vas asked.
How long will this last?
Emily replied.
It's hard to tell. I was taught how to do this, but I've never done it until now.
After a while, Lieutenant Trank stood.
Captain, you should sleep now. Doctor, let's leave him for now.
And with that, the two ladies left my cabin. In the corridor, T'Vas said,
Perhaps one of us should monitor the captain every day. I'll check him tomorrow morning if you check the next day.
That agreement made Lieutenant Trank and Lieutenant Commander T'Vas started to their cabins. As they turned to leave, Lieutenant Trank said,
Doctor, you are in love with our captain, aren't you?
T'Vas answered.
No, Emily, I am not.
Emily smiled.
T'Vas, you forget, I was inside your head. You are in love with the captain. Does he know?
T'Vas replied.
No. He doesn't know.
Emily told the doctor.
Tell him. If you don't, I will.
T'Vas started to cry.
Emily, please don't tell him. Please. I beg you, don't tell him.
T'Vas, don't you want to be happy? Our captain is an extraordinary man, you need to tell him.
Oh, Emily, I can't. It's too embarrassing. Please. Don't tell him.
Every morning as I walked through the ship, I would see T'Vas in other crewmen's company or simply going from one place to another. She would always acknowledge my presence with a
Good morning, Captain.
or a smile and a wave. At first, I noticed her once or twice a day, but then, it became more often, 2 or 3 times a day. Finally, I decided to alter my daily routine, but she was still there several times a day. Although, during our first tour together, she had not been that gregarious, now she seemed to be in the company of many different crew members, from commanders to able spaceman. One morning, I came across Commander Trank and stopped her to talk. Emily, tell me about T'Vas. She seems more sociable than when we first began work on the ship. Emily replied.
I think she is somewhat lonely since Sarel was taken from her. I think she's just reaching out to her shipmates to fill her void, and maybe a void in the others too.
I said, well, if that's so, good. Emily answered.
Captain, why don't you ask her to dinner one evening? It might do you both some good.
I thought a moment. I consider that. Thanks. Well, I guess we both should get back to work. She smiled and nodded.
Good morning, Captain.
And we went about our separate ways. It was about 2 weeks to the southern wormhole, and I didn't expect any trouble getting there, so I continued my daily walks around the Constitution. And as before, I bumped into Commander Trank and Dr. T'Vas several times a day. We might just nod or stop and chat. It made that daily walk pleasant, and I began to look forward to my daily interaction with those 2 officers. One afternoon, as I walked by sickbay, I noticed the door ajar, so I stuck my head in and saw T'Vas sitting in her office. Doctor, may I interrupt you a moment? She smiled and waved me in.
Captain, what can I do for you?
I replied, I simply wanted to ask you whether you would care to dine with me one evening and maybe enjoy a movie with me? She thought a moment.
That would be nice. When would you like to do that?
I answered, how about this evening? She nodded.
1800, your cabin.
I turned, it's a date. I went to the bridge and asked Joel to step into the ready room. Lieutenant Steele, you have the con. As the door closed, I turned to Joel. Joel, I have a date with T'Vas this evening, any advice? He smiled.
What have you thought about?
I replied, well, back in my day, dinner and a movie. He nodded.
That sounds good. What would you feed her?
I answered, I don't know. They have a dish kinda like chicken chow mein. I guess we could have chow mein. He asked.
What movie?
I scratched my head, I don't know. What would she like? He said.
Why don't you start with your favorite movie? By the way, what is your favorite movie?
I said, Superman, the movie. With Christopher Reeve. He smiled.
That's a classic.
Then he advised me to get a love seat and introduce her to popcorn. I laughed, may as well go all out. Thanks, number one, I owe you. 1800, and carrying Ginny, I reached for the annunciator at T'Vas' cabin. But before I could touch it, the door opened, and she stepped out. We walked to my cabin and were met by Davy.
Hi T'Vas. Are you going to have dinner with us?
She hugged Davy and said,
Why, yes. Your dad asked me. Is that okay?
He hugged her back.
Oh yeah, it's great. Dad, what's for dinner?
I replied, chicken chow mein. I turned to T'Vas, I hope that's okay. She replied,
I've never tried it. Let's see.
I served dinner, and it seemed to go over very well with Davy and T'Vas. We ate and talked. Davy asked about a dessert. T'Vas suggested ice cream, and we all had some chocolate ice cream. Ginny loved her ice cream and got it all over her face, as usual. After dinner, I put Ginny to bed, then Davy wanted to do our martial arts exercises, and T'Vas wanted to watch. After that, Davy sat beside her and asked her to read a chapter of the Yellowtooth Adventure. Davy went off to bathe and get ready for bed. I said, my kids are the best thing that has ever happened to me. I don't think I could have survived if it were not for Ginny and Davy. She replied,
He is a fine boy and Ginny is a beautiful little girl, the reflection of their parents. And now, a reflection of their father. I wish Saril and I had a child, but it was not to be.
We put Davy to bed, then went out to watch the movie. We did sit on the love seat, and I did introduce her to popcorn as we watched Superman the movie. After the film, she asked,
That seems to be an old, what did you call it? A movie?
I told her, the movie was released to the public on December 15, 1978, that's over 500 years ago. She thought,
I would think a man with the powers Superman had, I would have heard about him. But I've never heard of Superman.
I had to confess, there never was a Superman. Superman was the product of the imagination of two young men, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, who longed for justice for the downtrodden. So they invented Superman. He was a comic book hero. They started publishing Superman on April 18, 1938. She said,
Captain, I have enjoyed this evening, thank you so much.
I replied, T'Vas, my name is David. Would you like to do this again? She smiled.
Yes, David, I would.
I asked, tomorrow evening, 1800? She agreed.
I would love to.
I asked, my only question, well, not a question. I don't know much about Hephaestousian cuisine. Would you command the replicator? She nodded. I walked her to her cabin, took her hand, and said good night. She gently pulled me close and kissed my cheek.
Good night, David.
During my tour of the ship the following morning, I saw her again as she walked with Lieutenant Trank. She smiled and waved.
Good morning, Captain. Nice day. Don't you think?
I had to agree. Later in the afternoon, I happened upon Lieutenant Trank. She came up behind me.
Good afternoon, Captain.
I was startled. Emily, what? She laughed.
I heard you and T'Vas had a great time last night.
Again, I was somewhat startled. How? Who? Where? She laughed.
T'Vas talked with me last night. She was, how should I say this? She was gobsmacked. She could only rave about you, Ginny and Davy, dinner, and the movie. I think she likes you. Going to pursue her?
I replied, I wish I knew. I want to, but I've never been into this dating thing, she said.
Just do what you did, and everything will be okay.
She giggled, turned, and left. 1800 and again, I reached for the annunciator at T'Vas' cabin again, and again just before I touched the button, she opened the door. She was dressed in a pretty blouse and skirt. I had never seen her so dressed before, but the pattern was familiar. I thought a while, and then I remembered that I had seen the girls wearing such an outfit when I was in high school, a white blouse with a pink bow, a gray flannel skirt adorned with big pink poodles, and a bunch of crinoline petticoats. I felt underdressed, so when we got to my cabin, I changed into a new white t-shirt, Levi's, and sneakers. I just could not achieve a duck butt hairstyle. The routine was like the evening before. After dinner and conversation, chocolate ice cream, martial arts, and reading a chapter in the Yellow Tooth Adventure, Davy went to bed. T'Vas said,
That is one wonderful boy. He is everything I would wish for in a son. And Ginny, she's a dear. She's going to be a heartbreaker.
I said, I hope I teach her better than that. We sat for a few minutes, then, she asked what movie I had chosen for the evening. I answered, Captain America with Chris Evans. And she asked about popcorn and Coke. We sat on the love seat, and she snuggled with me, then, during a lull in the movie, she sat looking me in the eyes, and I had to kiss her. Then she sighed. I had heard that sigh from two other women, my first wife in 1962 and my second wife in 1985 and 2492. And the effect on me was the same as it had been so many years before. I gave my heart to the one who sighed. After the movie, she stood.
I guess I should go to my cabin.
She whispered in my ear.
Thank you for a wonderful evening, David.
I took her in my arms and asked, Tomorrow evening? She nodded.
Yes.
Then I walked her to her cabin. We stood by her door, I held her and kissed her. Good night, T'Vas. She told me in whispered tones.
David, I have a secret name. Translated it means glow.
Good night, Glow. Sleep well. I kissed her again and walked back to my cabin. I didn't sleep all that well that night. I felt like I did in high school, young, strong, virile, and dumber than dirt. When I was with a girl I liked, I felt stupid. We had reached the southern wormhole, and Joel had paused the ship.
Captain, we're ready.
I urged, let's do it. Helm, into the wormhole. 16 nanoseconds later and we faced the ships of the Dolphin people.
Captain, we're being hailed.
On screen, I replied. The Dolphin said,
Captain Stevens, as you entered the wormhole after your last visit, I thought, we are a carbon-based life form. May we have the cure?
I replied, I will have to laminate the pages so they will survive underwater. Give us 2 hours. I ordered my yeoman to make a laminated copy of the cure and to title it AC-3, then teleported to the Dolphin's ship. Then we pressed on the Angel Cloud 3 to deliver the galaxy's gratitude and apologize for the threat I had issued. Each glow would appear and start to intercept us, but after approaching the ship, the glow would dissipate. My theory is that the glow recognized the Constitution and decided not to waste time on us. So, the trip to Angel Cloud 3 was fraught with a little anxiety, but nothing we couldn't handle. About 100 light years from Angel Cloud, we were engulfed in a cloud of sparkling motes that made navigation difficult. Then my crew stopped moving, they just quietly, motionless, and I heard a voice in my head.
Who are you?
The voice was like the caterpillar talking to Alice in the Disney movie, Alice in Wonderland. I replied, I am Captain David Stevens of the USS Constitution from the United System Navy. The voice said,
That is true, but incomplete. Who are you?
I am Commodore David Stevens. The voice said,
Who are you?
I replied, We are explorers from the United System Federation. Then the voice asked,
Why are you here?
I said, as I said, we are explorers, explorers explore. The voice asked,
Where are you going?
I answered, we are going to a planet designated Angel Cloud 3. Silence, and then,
Why are you going to Angel Cloud 3?
Many questions later, the voice said,
You are fatigued. You and your crew rest. We will continue tomorrow.
The crew stood and left the bridge like so many zombies. The swing crew came in and sat like zombies, and I returned to my cabin. I entered and saw Davy, Ginny, and T'Vas sitting at the table, and the voice said,
Feed them and put them to bed.
I asked, is everyone in the crew like this? The voice said,
Yes. They will feed themselves and sleep. But you are the only free agent among them.
I asked, why? The voice responded,
Eat and rest. We will speak tomorrow.
So I fed Ginny, Davy, and T'Vas lasagna and put them to bed. Davy and Ginny were easy, I'd been putting them to bed for 8 years. T'Vas, on the other hand, was very uncomfortable. I did not want to compromise her dignity, so I removed her shoes and socks and put her in my bed. I curled up on my sofa and tried to get a little sleep. Morning came, and the voice told me to feed my children and T'Vas and to meet it on the bridge. The voice asked,
Where are you from?
I told the voice that I would not divulge that information, and it asked why. I responded, I don't know you. I don't know your motives. I don't know where you are from. I know nothing about you, therefore, no information about our civilization.
I could crush you.
And I replied, do it, I tire of this. Go on, get it over with, destroy us. The voice replied,
Commodore, Captain Stevens, you are free to go. We will meet again.
And the crew came to life as if nothing had happened. Barbara almost jumped.
Captain, we are only 100 miles from Angel Cloud 3. How?
I told her not to worry, I knew the answer to her question. Upon achieving orbit around Angel Cloud 3, I teleported down to the Governmental Congress. I was ushered in, and I apologized for my threats during my last visit. We have chosen to title the cure AC3 to honor those who developed it. Our doctors have assured us that AC3 works as you said it would. Not only that, but cancers of all types have responded to the cure. So I am here to say thank you from every carbon-based life form we have ever encountered. Then I asked them to forgive me for my threat and rage. The Prime Minister answered,
Captain, no one here can blame you because of the loss of your wife, your children's mother, to this dreadful cancer. We forgave you when you left US after your visit.
I responded, I can only hold such a civilization in high regard. I will take my leave and not disturb this body again, goodbye. I did a snappy about face and returned to my ship. I patted Joel on the shoulder and said, that's done, let's explore. Hank, pick out a star, and let's go see it. Hank smiled.
Aye, sir.
So Barbara broke orbit, and we began to explore this side of our galaxy. That evening at 1800, I, once again reached for the annunciator at T'Vas' door. And again she opened the door before I could press the button. She smiled.
David, I hoped you would call. I'm sorry about last night, I don't remember what happened. I just realized I might have done something wrong when I woke up, fully dressed in your bed this morning.
I assured her that nothing untoward had happened. One day, I might explain everything, but it's nothing to worry about right now. I prepared dinner for the four of us, we talked about her people, then afterward, our usual routine, chocolate ice cream, martial arts practice, story reading, then Davy was off to bed and we settled down to watch a movie, this time Sleepless in Seattle, with Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. We sat on the love seat and petted some. After the movie, she shyly asked,
David, may I stay the night with you?
Yes, I replied. Then she asked,
May I sleep with you?
and I said, yes. Then she asked,
David, will you make love to me?
to which I replied, only if it's what you want. I pulled her close and she said,
It's what I want.
I held her for a long time and she started to cry. Flo, what is it? She whispered,
It's been so long.
and I reached for the buttons on her blouse. She was completely naked and just stood as I sighed, oh, Flo, you are so very beautiful. She smiled and reached for the buttons on my uniform. Standing naked, I took her in my arms and gently kissed her, then led her to the bedroom. The four of us sat at the table eating breakfast and Davy asked,
Dad, is T'Vas going to live with us?
T'Vas, and I looked at him and I asked, how would you feel about that? He said,
It's almost like having Mom here. I would like it.
T'Vas blushed and said,
I couldn't ask for two better men to be in my life right now than you two, and Virginia is the daughter I would love forever.
Davy brightened.
Do you love my dad?
She nodded her head. Yes, I do.
Davy turned,
Do you love your dad?
and I answered as I glanced at T'Vas, I think I do. Then her face began to glow. We finished and I walked her to her cabin. At the door I took her in my arms, she asked.
Did you mean what you said?
And I replied, yes. Have you ever known me to say something I didn't mean? And she smiled.
No, never.
I kissed her and we parted. As we approached Angel Cloud 2, we happened upon 3 spiral ships just floating in space. I ordered the sensor lab to scan the 3 ships.
Captain, the sensors indicate 200 life signs on each ship, but seem to be comatose.
I ordered Joel, number 1, take a team and investigate those ships. Kate, I'm sending Joel and a team over to the ships, keep tabs on our crewmen. She replied,
Aye, sir.
I assumed that these ships were unresurrected victims of the death pulse and so, ordered engineering to trigger the life pulse and we moved on. The next evening, T'Vas had asked me to join her in her cabin. My kids stayed in the child care facility that evening, to eat and play until I would come and fetch them. At 1800, I reached for the annunciator as T'Vas opened the door and invited me in. She had prepared a steak and potato dinner, which I, as a steak and potato kind of guy, thoroughly enjoyed. We talked about our families, our loves and our hopes. As she rose, I motioned for her to remain seated. I stood, stepped around the table, and knelt on one knee. T'Vas, Glow, I do love you. I am in love with you and I hope to grow old and spend the remainder of my days in your arms. Glow, will you marry me? Would you become my wife? She began to cry.
Oh, David, Captain, I am in love with you. But I could never marry you. My family would never accept such a marriage, a Hephaestus and a human. I would be disowned, disinherited, and shunned for the rest of my life.
I stared at her, my heart shattered. I stood, apologized, and went to the child care facility to pick up Davy and Ginny and return to my cabin. Davy turned and asked in an excited tone,
Is T'Vas going to come over tonight?
I looked at my son. I'm sorry, son, I guess that she won't be having supper with us anymore. I ignored his protests and sent him off to bathe and get ready for bed. While he washed, I sat and for the first time since Stella's death, I wept, openly and without shame. Davy came to where I was sitting. Seeing the tears in my eyes, he asked,
Dad, what's wrong?
Son, I wanted to be with T'Vas for the rest of my life. But that just isn't going to happen. And my heart hurts. But it will be alright, we got each other and we'll be great. And we laughed as I tucked him in bed. See you in the morning, son. And I kissed his cheek.
Good night, Dad. I love you.
I knelt and hugged him. I love you too, son. My love for my little princess and my son became my anchor, anchoring me to the here and now, my responsibilities and my joys. The next morning I was privileged to announce the promotion of several officers and crewmen. Lieutenant Trank was among the celebrants, now Lieutenant Commander Trank. After the ceremony, she asked to talk privately.
Captain, what happened between you and T'Vas last night? She is absolutely devastated.
Emily, I asked her to marry me. Emily's face lit up like a Roman candle.
Oh, that's wonderful, sir. When?
Emily, she turned me down. Flat. Her family would never accept such a marriage between a Hephaestus and a human. She saw tears running down my face. Emily sighed.
I'm so sorry, sir. I'll not interfere.
And she left the bridge. I found out later that Commander Trank confronted T'Vas and blasted her.
T'Vas, what the hell is wrong with you? You throw away the man you say you love, you break his heart, you're devastated, all because your family would not accept the marriage. What the hell are you thinking with your butt? Or are you just plain stupid? Remember the Hephaestus girl that defied her family on being bonded, on becoming a naval officer, and who knows what else you stood against? Girl, get your head out of your butt and get back together with the man you love.
T'Vas bristled.
Lieutenant Commander Trank.
Emily shouted.
Don't you try to pull rank on me. I am your best friend. And I'm the only one with the guts to tell you screwed up big time. Get off your butt and go beg the captain to forgive your stupidity and to take you back.
Oh, Emily, what should I do? I broke his heart, what should I do?
Girl, get your butt up to his ready room and apologize. Tell him you're in love with him and you will be the best wife to him and mother to his children. Get down on your knees if you have to. Tell him, ask him to forgive your stupidity, that you just forgot who you are.
It was about 2 hours later that T'Vas asked my first officer to speak to me. Joel stuck his head in the door.
Captain, the doctor is asking to talk with you.
My heart leapt into my throat. I squeaked, ask her to come in. She entered, rather sheepishly.
David, I'm so sorry about last night. I do love you and I do want to marry you and be a mother to Davy and Ginny, and maybe my own children eventually. Will you forgive?
I stood, took her in my arms, and silenced her with a kiss. Trank? Right? She nodded.
Yes.
She wasn't going to interfere? Ha. I gotta think of some way to reward that lady. T'Vas said.
I'm going to ask her to be my maid of honor.
I asked Commodore O'Reilly to conduct the wedding for T'Vas and me. As we discussed the vows to be uttered, T'Vas asked that obey be part of her vows, to love, honor, cherish, and obey. I asked that protect be part of my vows, to love, honor, cherish, and protect. And we both wanted, forsaking all others, to be part of our vows. During our wedding, when T'Vas recited her vows, several female crew members' eyebrows shot up, and we heard a murmur.
Obey.
T'Vas turned and said,
Yes. Obey. He is my captain, he is my love, and he is my husband.
When I recited my vows, the male crew members all nodded in agreement. I turned and said, I will protect. I will protect even if it means the end of my life. The forsaking of all others drew nods of approval from the entire crew. The crew knows the meaning of loyalty. O'Reilly then intoned, I now pronounce you husband and wife, you may kiss your bride. I did the dip and the whole crew whispered in awe.
Ah.
With that I took T'Vas' hand and we ran down the corridor to our cabin, and with Ginny and Davy, we began our life as a family. It was about a month later that T'Vas and I were relaxing in our cabin watching Davy and Ginny playing on the deck nearby. As we talked about our future as a family, Ginny toddled over to my glow and grabbed her leg. Ginny smiled up at T'Vas, raised her arms, and said,
Up?
T'Vas picked her up and put Ginny on her lap. Ginny reached up and patted T'Vas's face, kissed her cheek, and said,
Mommy.
Then she wiggled off T'Vas' lap and ran back to play. After we put Ginny to bed, and had Davy bathe, my boy walked out, ready for bed, and looking from me to T'Vas, he asked,
Can I call you Mom?
She looked from Davy to me and back, she kissed his cheek and said,
Oh Davy, you may call me Mom. May I call you son?
He smiled, kissed her cheek and nodded, saying,
Yes, Mom. I would like that.
I looked at her face and saw the tears, trouble, glow. She snuggled up against me and, through her tears, said,
Oh David, I'm so happy. I love your children, may I adopt them?
Since it would make you happy, yes. Of course. I replied. She said,
You, Ginny, and Davy make me so happy, I want to introduce you three to my parents.
I wondered, is that wise?
Well, I have something else to tell you. I'm pregnant.
This woman had just made my century.